Allen Lund Company has new offices in Ogden, Utah and Indianapolis, Indiana. Check allenlund.com to reach them.
OOIDA, representing America's truckers since 1973, presents Landline Now with your host, Scott Thompson.
Thanks for joining us. We truly do appreciate it, and we've got a lot in store for you today. Here in just a moment, we'll get to new developments on two items that affect your bottom line, insurance and fuel. Then after that, we'll delve into California's plan for autonomous trucks with Jay Grimes, OIDA Director of Federal Affairs. He'll also help us make sense of a USDOT update on a number of regulations that are currently in the pipeline, a list that includes speed limiters and broker transparency. And speaking of brokers, if you deal with them, you may have noticed them tacking on extra fees for things like late deliveries or for failing to use tracking software, and those fees can get costly. What's up with that? Tom Crowley and Aaron Lynch of OOIDA's Compliance Department stopped by to discuss. And finally, we'll close things out with our state legislative expert, Keith Goebel of Landline Magazine. He's tracking changes in New Jersey and California on a few issues, and we'll get the inside scoop there. So, like I said, lots of show yet to come. But first, the news. And we are joined in Studio A by Jamie Jones, managing editor of Landline Magazine. Jamie, always good to see you.
Hey, good to be here, Scott.
Let's start here with H.R. 6884 in the House, which probably won't mean anything to anybody out there, but if it gains traction, it would mean a 566% hike in the minimum insurance requirement for motor carriers. You heard that right, 566% hike. It's called the Fair Compensation for Truck Crash Victims Act, which was introduced or reintroduced, I guess, by Congressman Chuy Garcia late last year. But it's back in the spotlight now, Jamie, because it just picked up a new co-sponsor.
It did. On earlier in September, Representative Kevin Mullen, a Democrat out of California, signed on to the bill. And, you know, usually we get pretty excited when we start getting co-sponsors on legislation, obviously, that's friendly to truckers.
Not this one.
Not this one. And the good news is he only tips the needle to 7 co-sponsors on this particular bill. But it's pretty easy to think, well, it's not going anywhere and be real dismissive. And that's not the case. This is a sleeping dog, and we can't let it lie, because at any point we could see this legislation potentially get added to an appropriations bill, which has to fund the Department of Transportation and is passed annually. We've talked about that a lot. We will have a highway bill coming up, and they've tried it before, and they'll try it again. So it's important to understand, while there's so many hot-button issues out there. I mean, we're talking about speed limiters, broker transparency. We're talking, detention time, overtime pay for truckers, all these other things. It's legislation like that you can't ever fully let it off of your radar.
Yeah, and just to kind of go over the basics here, the current minimum is $750,000. This bill would increase that minimum insurance requirement to $5 million. So again, 566% jump there. As we said there, I don't think the chances of this passing the House and being signed into law are very high at all. But as you mentioned, there are those concerns about what may happen down the line. I think this also is worth kind of mentioning, too, that when it gains a co-sponsor and this comes back into light, it's going to gain more attention, from those on Capitol Hill. It's also important that when that happens, the people that this would affect, truck drivers, motor carriers, reach out to their lawmakers and let them know why this is such a bad thing, why this would be such a bad thing for them if it took effect.
Well, and the thing is, even though you tripped over it, the name of this legislation alone, it is wrapped up in emotion because Fair Compensation for Truck Crash Victims Act. From the drop, they are sitting here, portraying truckers as, the villain in this narrative, that there's these victims out here being run over by rogue truckers and, it's costing them blah, 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 blah. No, the people who make money off of these things are trial attorneys.
You see the billboard. If you look for the billboards, those are the people making money off of this.
That's exactly what goes on. And so when you look at actually the current minimums, the current requirement of $750,000 on general freight, 99.4% of all truck-involved crashes more than cover, that $750,000 more than covers the damage, be it physical, whatever, to the vehicles, whatever. That covers it. So we're looking at a very minuscule number of lawsuits out there that the current levels do not cover. And it's just so trying because, if you listen to yesterday's show, we spent a lot of time talking about tort reform and these nuclear verdict cases, one out of Texas and one out of Missouri right now. And these are the things, these are a death sentence to any small trucking company for sure. And when you start talking, I believe Wabash is facing almost $500 million in a jury judgment. $500 million. Not a lot of large motor carriers are going to stay in business after something like that. Yeah. So just artificially raising the insurance requirements so that attorneys can make more money when it's not needed and it's a profit center, no. This is a hard no. Point to those lawsuits. Point to tort reform. Talk to your lawmakers.
This is something where education goes a long way because I think it's one of these things that sounds good on paper, looks good on paper. It makes sense when you kind of look at it just, as you're glancing at it. Oh, that kind of makes sense. However, when you get into the implications and you talk about how this would affect small trucking companies and affect the industry as a whole, the picture gets a little more murky there. So it is important. Again, reach out to your lawmakers. Even though this is not gaining a whole lot of traction, it is worth reaching out to your lawmakers and letting them know what effect this would have on you, what effect it would have on everybody else out there in the trucking industry. And as we've always said, the easiest way to do that, fightingfortruckers.com.
Yeah, effectively, we're playing defense on this one. So keep it up.
Let's move on to something else real quick here. We don't have a whole lot of time, but I did want to talk about fuel prices. We do this every week. We talk about fuel prices. They've been down or going down, I guess, now for more than 2 months on the EIA survey, which seems like we're trending in that direction. However, I know you wanted to kind of put a warning out there for folks because we could be headed for a volatile few months with regard to fuel prices.
Yeah, and the Energy Information Administration really isn't kind of hinting to that in their short-term outlook, but there's a lot of things that history tells us is going to cause us problems potentially over the next few months. One, ahead of a presidential election, there's always pressure to reduce fuel prices. And I'm talking gasoline and diesel both because it's popular for lawmakers to be able to point to those. So that's pressure to have it down. The other thing we've got going, we have Hurricane Francine that just hit Louisiana. And when it came through the Gulf, it actually shut down oil rigs. Bloomberg had reported earlier this week that the U.S. Oil productions was at record highs. That could come to an end. So we could be looking at a rocky, wavy, volatile time ahead on fuel prices. And, really anybody who's been through the past year and a half of not great rates, high fuel prices and everything else, do not let up. Do not think that just because they're dropping right now that this is really going to hold tight through the end of the year. Know your cost per mile. Keep a financial buffer in there in case you get stuck. And, a 10 cent per gallon swing, that's huge.
That is a big,
that's huge.
A big swing there for sure. Jamie, we appreciate it as always. We'll obviously keep people updated on these stories and more at landline.media, and we'll catch you again soon.
Thanks, Scott.
Marty Ellis is back on the road with the OOIDA tour truck from Thursday through Saturday. He's at the Petro in New Paris, Ohio. That's at the U.S. Route 40 I-70 interchange, so swing by if you're in the area, say hi to Marty and join OOIDA or renew your membership at a discount. Coming up next, we welcome Jay Grimes of OOIDA to the show. He's got updates out of California where a change of heart means a change in policy for autonomous trucks, and the USDOT timeline for a number of rules like speed limiters and broker transparency just got updated. That's coming up right after the break, so hang tight. Landline Now is back right after this.
Thanks for listening. Be sure to like and subscribe. If you want more content, go to landline.media to get updated news, information, and archived editions of our show. Once again, that's landline.media.
Capital Reman is your leading source for quality remanufactured engines and components. Capital Reman stands ready to serve all OOIDA members to help reduce costly engine repairs or replacement. Visit capitalreman.com today and use code OOIDA10 to save.
Penske is the trusted source for quality used trucks. Whether you search our website, call our sales staff, or bid at our online auction, you are sure to find the right used truck for your business. Visit PenskeUsedTrucks.com to view our inventory and learn more.
It's tested and proven. Burn 2.1% less fuel when you balance all wheel ends with Centromatic. Call 800-523-8473 to get the OOIDA discount.
The California Department of Motor Vehicles has made public a proposal for autonomous trucks in that state. Welcome back to Landline Now. This is Regulatory Roundup, and I'm Mark Reddick, and I'm joined as always by OOIDA Director of Federal Affairs, Jay Grimes. Jay, how are you doing?
Doing well, Mark. Great to be back.
Well, good to have you, and this is pretty interesting because things are kind of boiling in California on this issue. It's not only being dealt with at the DMV, as we mentioned at the start, but also in the legislature, where they've got a bill that would require a driver in any autonomous truck. I'm kind of wondering if we can start with what some of the key issues are that are at play here in this whole debate and what the DMV is doing.
Yeah, so a couple things. Up until this point, California, has not allowed autonomous trucks weighing over 10,000 pounds to be in operation, and they have now put out what they refer to as a draft framework proposal that will be used to inform standards for operating autonomous vehicles over that 10,000-pound threshold. This has been an effort that the DMV has been working on for a couple years in consultation with the California Highway Patrol and gathering public feedback on safety, economic, and workforce implications associated with AV trucks. The framework would allow AV trucks to operate on roads with speed limits of 50 miles an hour or more and on frontage access roads. And according to the summary, this would essentially allow long-haul deliveries along hub-to-hub routes and in less complex operational areas. And it kind of sets up a kind of a two-phase system. First, you'll have vehicles that have a driver behind the wheel. The developer would have to issue what's called an operational domain design. And once they kind of document kind of an overall safety approach, submit a safety case with that permit, eventually that company could deploy their vehicles without a human behind the wheel, which, as you kind of mentioned earlier, we've seen some legislation that's been approved but hasn't been signed by the governor that would not allow any vehicles without a human driver behind the wheel. So a little bit of the regulatory side and the legislature out in California kind of opposing each other here. But again, this is just a proposed framework. It does prohibit certain operations, including household movers, oversized loads, hazmat materials, and bulk tankers from the framework, so they would not be allowed to operate with these autonomous vehicles. And again, the agency acknowledged that questions still exist to how law enforcement will cite autonomous trucks for moving violations. One of the questions that we've asked, not only different states, but certainly federal agencies as well. And again, this is just a proposed framework. So California is going to be taking public comments on this proposal through October 14th. So about a month and a half here to comment on some of these different aspects of a potential new framework out in California.
Now, this proposal is coming in the wake of some public meetings on this topic in California. I think that the DMV was involved with, as I recall. Were there other issues that came up in those meetings, or did it really kind of cover the same type of ground you've described to us already?
Yeah, I think mostly that was kind of the scope of the discussions is how can these technology developers prove that they're operating safely in sort of a controlled and comprehensive manner before they go straight to driverless trucks. So they've kind of for this proposal have kind of settled on this kind of phased in timeline where they've got to prove that this operational design domain is effective while a human is behind the wheel, can prove that they're interacting with first responders. So it does, I think, kind of set some benchmarks and guidelines. But also one of the main issues that we've discussed in raising some of our concerns with autonomous vehicles is getting information from manufacturers when they're involved in an accident. And this framework does put in what they call a preliminary information notice process that would require manufacturers to provide information on an accident within 24 to 72 hours, depending on the incident. Would require manufacturers to submit some additional information within 10 days as well. Of course, we've wanted more transparency throughout the testing and development process, not just after a crash or an accident happens, because we've seen throughout the country some of the safety concerns that these vehicles who aren't proven to operate the way they should a lot of the time can result in fatalities. So having this information process only after an accident, I think, does raise some more questions here. But I think based on the framework, it seems like California is eager to join some of these other states that we've seen kind of open up their roads to AV trucks, Texas, Arizona, kind of chief among them.
As you mentioned, they are accepting comments on this for a while yet. The deadline is October 14th. And if anyone wants to make comments on the California DMV's autonomous vehicle proposal, you can send those by email to autonomousvehicles@dmv.ca.gov. And a quick note, they are not going to accept anonymous comments. You will need to identify yourself when you make those comments.
That's correct. It must include the name of the person or organization up and through October 14th. So I think we're certainly, OIDA is going to be reviewing this draft framework and going to be submitting some feedback to California here before October 14th.
Let's go on to another topic here, and this is one that's got a lot going on. A couple of months ago, the U.S. Department of Transportation released its Unified Regulatory Agenda, which I think we've talked about it before and mentioned that sounds just deadly boring. But it's not. It indicates when we could see a number of regulations that are currently somewhere in the pipeline. And Jay, I want to dive right in. What we know about these in the wake of this Unified Regulatory Agenda, and I think a good starting point is speed limiters. First, what kind of rulemaking are we watching out for? I mean, what do we know about what they're looking to propose at this point?
Right. So, what we're looking out for is a formal notice of proposed rulemaking from FMCSA, which would be similar to a proposal or similar step to what we saw back in 2016 when we really first saw a significant proposal, and it was a joint proposal between FMCSA and the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration requiring speed limiters on commercial vehicles. And kind of going back in time here, they did not set a specific speed in that proposal. They kind of mentioned that they were considering 60, 65, 68. Of course, we saw a lot of backlash and opposition to that notice of proposed rulemaking, and frankly, the agencies kind of let that go into the wind, never really advanced that, and it was really on the back burner up until 2022, April of 2022, where somewhat out of the blue, FMCSA put out a supplemental notice of proposed rulemaking, kind of reopening the process, and this was just somewhat different because this was just FMCSA. NHTSA was not involved in that, and of course, that supplemental proposal got quite a bit of opposition as well. And for the most part, we've kind of seen some kind of the same effect. FMCSA has not advanced anything beyond that supplemental proposal that we saw in 2022. And they've, in fact, quite a few times have delayed the pending planned next step in the regulatory process. First in June of 2023, then in December of 2023, May of 2024, and now another delay. And we're not expecting the next phase to be out as soon as the next step would be May of 2025. So kind of another interesting update in the speed limiter saga. Obviously, we remain in adamant opposition to any speed limiter mandate that FMCSA may or may not advance, and have introduced legislation to prohibit FMCSA from moving forward with any proposal. But May of 2025 is kind of the next projected date. Obviously, we've seen some of those deadlines come and go throughout the past couple of years, but from what we've seen, we don't see there's anything to change our opposition, given a number of safety operational concerns. And frankly, if this never comes to pass in May 2025, we're not going to bat an eye.
Okay, well, we got a little bit of time left. I do want to get to some of these others, and another hot button here is broker transparency. And first, walk us through what FMCSA has, or maybe more appropriately, has not done to this point on this issue.
Yeah, this is kind of one where we'd rather not see a delay like we have seen on the speed limit proposal. And this really goes back to a petition that OOIDA filed back in 2020 that would require FMCSA to force brokers to automatically provide an electronic copy of each transaction record within 48 hours after the contractual service has been completed, and to explicitly prohibit brokers from including any provision that requires carriers to waive their rights to access the transaction records. And we know regulations are already on the books that are intended to provide broker transparency and require that brokers keep records of each transaction. Of course, we know brokers go through lots of loopholes to ensure that carriers can access those records. And certainly we haven't seen a whole lot of action from FMCSA to actually enforce the 371.3 regulations. And that was really one of the reasons we filed this petition, is that we need some stricter language in the regulations, and we need to see some modernization of the regulations as well. And there was a back and forth between FMCSA, our petition. The Transportation Intermediaries Association actually filed their own separate petition to eliminate the 371.3 regulations altogether. But back in March 2023, FMCSA announced that they would move forward with a broker transparency rulemaking, in effect granting our petition, denying TIA's petition. Of course, here we are now, almost a year and a half later, and we're still waiting on that FMCSA broker transparency proposal. We've heard it's going to be October of 2024. In the latest Unified Regulatory Agenda, FMCSA maintained that October 2024 date, but we're kind of, cautiously optimistic that FMCSA is going to hold to that. And we have seen some steps that FMCSA has taken to prioritize broker fraud, and broker transparency is going to be one way of doing that. But we are really, anxiously awaiting this formal broker transparency. Hopefully that will be out, I guess it'll be next month now.
Okay. Well, Jay, we're out of time, but a lot of good information. I wish we could get to some of the others, but maybe sometime in the future. Thank you.
Sounds good.
I've been talking with OOIDA's Director of Federal Affairs, Jay Grimes. We'll be back in just a moment. I'm Mark Reddick, and this is Landline Now.
Truckdown.com. Whenever you have a breakdown, you need Truckdown.com. 24/7 access to 40,000 verified heavy-duty repair vendors nationwide.
Repair secured. Load assured.
Truckdown.com.
Firestone tires are for more of everything, with more durability for more miles and more confidence in your fleet. Firestone's tested tires help fleets save with value where it matters most. Learn more at bridgestonenationalfleet.com/4moremiles.
Dispatch, I picked up that load of steel, so I'm ready to roll.
Sounds good. Remember, we're getting paid by weight, so make sure to use a cat scale.
I wouldn't weigh anywhere else.
Forget miss accuracy, weigh your truck on a cat scale.
Landline Now, welcome back. One phenomenon we've seen out in the world of late, especially on the spot market, is a tendency on the part of some brokers to charge truckers certain fees. So what are those fees, and maybe how can you avoid them? Here with some advice are Tom Crowley and Aaron Lynch of OOIDA's Compliance Department. Guys, how are you doing?
Good. Good to be here.
Good to be here, Mark.
Let's talk a little bit here first about what these fees are. What type of fees are we seeing these brokers charge to truckers? Because it seems like the money's supposed to be going the other way.
Well, agreed, 100% is supposed to go the other way. I mean, they charge them fee in these broker carrier agreements. All kinds of stuff comes to light. I mean, they charge them fees for not tracking, for failed tracking, for late deliveries, for early deliveries. I mean, there's fees on the fees, even on some of this tracking stuff, you have tracking, and then you still have brokers that bug drivers to death, calling them, and then they want to charge them a fee for a missed check call. I mean, there's fees, and I question, where does this money go? Does this go into the broker's Friday night slush fund or what? If the customer is charging the broker, that's one thing. But, we don't see the proof of that. Of course, brokers don't want to be transparent. They don't want to show proof of anything.
And they are, of course, supposed to show
all
that stuff.
Of course, OOIDA has been pushing this for a long time, and supposedly the feds are going to come out with a transparency rule at the end of this year, I believe.
Unless they push it back again.
Like they did last year.
Yeah, that's happened a lot on a lot of things at FMCSA.
Kick that can, yeah.
Where in the process are truckers first finding out about these fees? I mean, when do truckers become aware that this is a possibility?
Well, they should become aware when they sign their contracts. But, as we know, many of these small carriers, they don't read these contracts thoroughly, or they get them on their phone. And, how are you going to read a 15-page or 20-page contract in little print on your phone? So most of them become aware of this stuff when they get when they've sent a bill in, and probably already factored the bill, and then the factoring company calls them or the broker calls them, and they see the invoice and they don't get paid for everything that they agreed for, that they were agreed to be paid.
Well, and you find out that, you get the load accepted and you get the rate, and they're like, okay, well, it's pickup time is this. Well, you're off to the races. You don't necessarily always take the time to read that 8-page, 10-page, 20-page contract that might, frankly, take an hour or two to actually read, digest, and understand in full, right? And so that's something that we offer, too. We will read the contract. Now, it will take time, right? But it's all about time management out there. Trucking's a hurry up and wait type of industry. You just have to be able to manage the time in between to the best of your ability. At least put a good faith effort into trying to read the contract, because like Tom was saying prior to me, a lot of times you're finding out after the fact or during the haul, and by then it's already too late. You've already signed that. You already got that load on your back. You may even already be at the receiver.
You mentioned reading the contract, and of course, that's something we tell people a lot. It's very important. But is there particular language we're looking for there, or is it pretty obvious what you're looking for in these contracts?
No, keep in mind these contracts are written by lawyers. They're, here you're a truck driver out there. You don't have a lot of time, and but that doesn't excuse the fact that you've signed this contract and you've agreed to it. Sometimes the terms are laid out even in the rate con. I've seen some of these rate cons of late. They've got a page of requirements and restrictions and fees and fines and all this just in the rate con. It's just ridiculous. There's nothing in that contract that allows for a driver to be sick, a truck to break down, or any of the above. If you fall back to Carmack amendment, there were remedies in there for how to deal with some things, delay or act of God or act of government, whatever, But there's nothing in these contracts now. I mean, they remove all those remedies. If you have a truck that breaks down, I mean, you're at the broker's mercy. Chances are you're going to end up paying, if you have to have that stuff cross-docked onto another truck, you're going to end up paying out more than you ever made on that load just to get another truck to show up to take that load and deliver it. All this without any proof from the broker. They're not providing any proof. I mean, transparency is supposed to be there, but it's not. And, that broker's just going to keep your funds, cross-collateralize.
Cross-collateralize.
Thank you. Cross-collateralize that to your other invoices, pending invoices that you haven't been paid for, and you're going to get a real nasty call from your factoring company real soon.
I remember years ago talking with some of you all about the fact that we would get these impossible delivery times, that when you got the load, it literally was not possible to legally run the distance you had to run in order to make that delivery time where you were going. And that to me seems like a setup just to get some of this penalty or fine money out of you. Are we still having that problem?
I mean, we still hear of that, among other things, yeah. I mean, if you're at the shipper and, they take 10 hours to load you and you got a 5-hour run to do and now you're out of your day, you must take a break, federally mandated, 10 hours off. I mean, how do you deal with that? That's an ugly situation. So you've called the broker. The broker said, "Oh yeah, don't worry about it. We'll take care of you." And then you get to the other end, find out you're late. They push off your delivery. Well, you were late, so there's going to be a fine, a rescheduling fee, all these fees and fines that goes along with this. Plus, you're sitting there for another day or 3 to get this product off. Losing money, and there's nobody paying you layover because they said, "Well, you were late." Well, I couldn't have done it. By the time they got me out of there, I couldn't have made it on time. There's nothing in these contracts that covers a carrier for that.
Well, and to me, that's coercion, right? But more so over where I see it at in my phone calls that I get is a carrier accepts the load and something happens and they drop off, or they have to repower the load and this new carrier comes in and now they get the Raycon and they get the contract and all that. But all these other parameters are still the same. And when you get to that receiver, that receiver is like, "Well, the load has been rescheduled," or "You're late." Well, that was their contract. That's not what my contract says.
Yeah,
but you're still held up to that same standard. So you're set up to fail when you're actually doing the broker a favor.
Yeah. Well, I've seen these situations as well. And, the second carrier that hauls that load that is just, was doing the broker a favor. The broker says, "Oh, I need you to go grab this load." And then the broker leaves them hanging, and they're sitting under this load at the receiver for hours or days to try to get it off. And there's no compensation for this. And people call up and they say, "Well, what are my rights?" Oh, that comes back to an ugly conversation because your rights, well, let's look at your contract and let's see what your rights are. And,
or lack of.
There are many rights in there for the broker, for the broker's customer, but there are very few options, if any, for the small carrier.
One of the things we haven't mentioned yet that I think is really important when we talk about these fines or penalties or fees or whatever we want to call them is how much money are we talking about here? Do you guys have an idea of some general parameters? What kind of fees are you seeing truckers charged by these brokers in these situations?
Well, I mean, in some situations, it's flat fee. It'll be detailed in the contract. If there's a tracking failure, it's $200. Or if the driver doesn't accept tracking, $200. In others, I've seen it's 20%. I mean, so if you have a $6,000 load and tracking fails, what are you going to lose? 20%. I mean, that's a big chunk of change. And it's detailed straight out in the Raycon of the one I've seen with that. And I know a lot of folks out there know because I've seen it on social media. I've seen a lot of truckers comment on this, and they're just, a lot of them say, "Well, I just won't haul for that broker, period." Well, that's a good thing, but unfortunately, there's somebody out there that is going to haul for them, probably unwitting, and I think in many situations, the broker, I would say, causes or allows the tracking to fail just so they can charge this fee or this fine. I mean, because think of it, if you put a load out there and right off the top that you're going to reduce the fee by the rate by 20%, that gives you a lot more latitude on getting somebody to haul that load and
raising the price, because you're going to get it back on the back end.
Yeah, I mean it's just an ugly business. A lot of crap going on out there that just shouldn't be happening. But again, it comes back to broker transparency. If we had the transparency that the FMCSR allows for or says is there, you wouldn't have a lot of this stuff.
Yeah, and I know there's some people struggling out there to do the math when you said that 20% a couple of times, but on that $6,000 load, that's $1,200.
Yes, that's a big hit. I mean, that could be, on many of these loads, that could be your profit margin, total profit margin.
Yeah. Yeah. What if you are cited for one of these fines or fees or penalties or whatever, but you don't think you deserve it, or you say that you didn't take the action they said the fine was for? Do you have recourse here? I mean, if you're in a he said, she said situation with a broker, what are your options? What can you do?
Well, I mean, the broker's got your money. They're the one holding your money. You've extended them a credit when you hold that load. And based upon that situation, I mean, your options are pretty limited. If you don't get paid what you are owed for the line haul rate, then, your option is to file on their bond. I mean, to try to work it out with them beforehand, but, if that's going to fail, then it's to file on their bond. A good bonding company would get in the middle of this and would look at all aspects of it and make a fair judgment. Most bond companies don't make much of a judgment. They go with the broker said, this is what the contact said, now this is what it's going to be, and they just short you. Other than that, your final option would be to take them to court, to lawyer up and take them to court, which is not always a good option for a small carrier. I mean, a small carrier up against a giant broker, that's just an ugly situation.
Well, and a lot of times it's these knick-knack penalties or fees. Like Tom said, it does scale, but a lot of what I see, it's usually $50 to $500. Are you going to take somebody to court over $300? Because usually at that point, you're spending more on going to that state or retaining an attorney, and it's more so proving the point as far as that goes, and it kind of loses sight of, well, I want to make this money back. Well, you usually spend more than you actually get back, so you actually go in the hole when you do that. And let's keep in mind, these brokers know that. They do. Right? That's why that they nickel and dime you. It's not always what Tom said about the scaling. It can be in certain situations with certain brokers, and they know who they are. But a lot of times it's more so the nickel and diming you, because they know that your alternative is nothing.
Yeah, that your option is not a good one. And, hey, you nickel and dime somebody and you get some money out of them.
Guys, thank you very much. We really appreciate all the information and advice.
Glad to be here, Mark.
Thanks as always, Mark.
I've been talking with Tom Crowley and Aaron Lynch of OOIDA's Compliance Department. And folks, if you need advice, if you need information, if you're in this type of situation, call Compliance. The phone number is 816-229-5791. We'll be back in just a moment with more of the show. I'm Mark Rettig, and this is Landline Now.
Ready to make more money? Use a better load board. For a limited time, get 50% off TruckStop Load Board Pro. Just go to truckstop.com/go and enter promo code READY2024 when you purchase Load Board Pro.
Are you tired of the IRS following you around like a dark cloud? Call 888-557-4020 and get your life back.
If you're running ultra-low sulfur diesel in your vehicle, make sure you are prepared and protected all winter long with Howes Diesel Treat, the #1 anti-gel product in North America from the 100-plus year trusted brand Howes Products.
Since you started, what you've loved about trucking is the freedom. Heading out on your favorite route, a good driving song, and thinking about truck insurance. Well, maybe not that last one. That's why we're here. At OOIDA, we have a full range of truck insurance products, expert advice, and great customer service, helping you get the right coverage for your operation. Go to OOIDA.com because your job is to drive. Our job is to help with everything else.
Welcome back. Time now to check in with our state legislative expert, the one and only Keith Goebel, for a check on what states are doing that could impact you and your job. We'll be spending some time in New Jersey and California today. Keith, how you doing?
I'm doing all right. How you doing?
Doing just fine. Football season has begun, so
if you like football,
then it's a good time
probably
of year.
Enjoy the time of year.
Exactly. Let's start in New Jersey. We've got several bills floating around the State House there right now that would cover rules for CDL holders. One has a connection with FMCSA's Drug and Alcohol Clearinghouse, which, as we've mentioned before on the program, has new requirements states must abide by in November. What can you tell us about what New Jersey is trying to do here?
Well, as you said, states are supposed to, make these revisions by November, so that's what they're doing in New Jersey. They're one of the few states that's in session all year long, and they've waited until well into the summer to really get this going there at the State House. At this point, both the New Jersey Senate and the Assembly have voted unanimously to send on to the governor. Again, the legislation just simply requiring their state, their motor vehicle commission to have the access and use information from the FMCSA's Drug and Alcohol Clearinghouse, have it as part of the requirement there that any applicant or someone who's renewing, even the hazmat endorsement, they get all that taken care of. So just essentially, folks well aware, states coming into compliance with, again, that pending mandate.
Yeah, and as we've also told you before, I think 175 CDLs could be downgraded as part of these new rules that the Clearinghouse is putting into effect. And as you said there, New Jersey is among many states just kind of trying to come in compliance with that. Let's kind of run through these bills here because we've got a number of them in New Jersey alone. This other one would give members of the military a pass from certain CDL requirements. It looks like. What's going on with that one?
Yeah, with that, just looking to provide a waiver. As it is now, the skills test, there is a waiver that's already there in the state. You don't have to test for certain CDLs. If you're a qualified military service member, would not have to go through the skills test. What they're looking to do is they have that same rule for the knowledge test. This legislation not as far along nearly as the previous one we were talking about, but we've seen this through the years, and states have had pursuits like this. New Jersey, one of the states who has yet to do that. As I mentioned, they're in session all year long. I mean, actually, their current session, 2-year session, it doesn't wrap up. Their 2-year sessions don't wrap up until the following January. I don't want to get too much on a tangent here, but they're in session until the 1st of next year. But still a lot of time. They don't have, the big election season there in New Jersey. They have odd year elections as compared to, obviously we're in an even year election. So it allows them to spend a bit more time on legislative issues, and they'll be working. We'll see if they continue to work on this particular effort there at the State House. But continuing to be busy there at the New Jersey State House.
Well, and busy not just with bills in general, but as we're kind of talking about here, and as you point out in your pieces on landline.media, multiple bills dedicated to trucking or related to trucking in some way. We mentioned a couple here already, but then they also have another here that will be news to anybody's ears who have ever dealt with the Motor Vehicle Commission there in New Jersey and had problems. there are some other bills, I guess, that are intended to improve customer service at the Motor Vehicle Commission there. What exactly are they trying to do here?
Yeah, this is a regular issue there at the State House. I know it's a regular issue for folks who have to do business with the New Jersey Motor Vehicle Commission. That's why they're seemingly always looking to make improvements. And the focus here is on online transactions, creating a call center so that they could help with that. During the pandemic, it was highlighted that there were a lot of services that there was a delay in response, and having the ability to do business online would significantly. The hope would be is that it would significantly improve service by giving folks another avenue to doing business instead of having to go into a facility. So like this particular bill, one of many. I wrote about a handful of them, but there's a lot of other legislation on this topic there at the State House. But creating a call center, so essentially you would have, I would say 9 to 5, but I think technically it's like 8:30 a.m. to like 4:30 p.m. At a minimum, each weekday, that there would be a call center that would be staffed, whether it's in-house employees or third-party contractors. They would be available to help folks who have questions about, again, doing their business online as compared to having to come into a Motor Vehicle Commission facility.
And human beings, right? It'll be human. That's my thing.
As it's written.
As it's written. Okay, yeah, that's my thing. I mean, anybody who's had to deal with customer service and you make that phone call and you deal with an automated thing that continues to tell you that they've fixed the problem when they haven't. But this sounds like it will be actually humans.
Yeah, anytime you're doing anytime. We're saying business. I mean, I think of I do most of my online on the phone type stuff. If I'm paying like bills, and oh my gosh, there are some. There's one, maybe two companies I could highlight, but I won't.
You're not going to put them on blast?
They're essentially their AI experience is absolutely awful.
It's the worst.
But you got to go through it. But fortunately, that's not what we're talking about here. They're talking about there is no mention of anything other than having an actual person available on the phone that can handle questions. The idea is to improve customer service. So hopefully a human would be a little bit better at that.
Yeah, we could do a whole hour on me just complaining about customer service phone calls and the lack of customer service that is provided on those phone calls. But we'll finish up here with another topic instead. We'll move to California here and some movement on a bill that seeks to clarify the weight limit rule for certain trucks. This, I believe, has something to do with electric vehicles, or is kind of prompted by that, right?
Yeah, near zero emission trucks. We've been talking about it here for, a decade. What is going back? You had a congressional act that allowed states to permit 82,000-pound loads, whether it's natural gas or electric battery-powered tractor trailers. They could do that traveling on interstates within those state borders. States could take those steps. California acted here within the past 5 years to authorize these zero and near zero emission trucks up to 82,000 pounds on the power unit. And there was concern, at least this year, I don't know how far it dates back, but there was concern that the wording of the California law in comparison to how the feds have it, that it could open up some vehicle operations there for trucks to have an issue with it. So they're rewording, again, some pretty basic stuff, authorizing 82,000-pound loads for those affected alternative fuel vehicles, so that there is not the issue that they believe is currently could be misleading there in the state as far as how it's intended to be interpreted. So just really, it's cleanup language, and it's something that the California Assembly has approved, that then the Senate has approved, and it has made its way to the governor's desk for an expected signature.
We'll leave it there, Keith. We appreciate your time as always. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for having me.
That was Keith Goebel of Landline Magazine, and that's our show for today. We thank you for listening. We'll hopefully catch you next time right here on Landline Now.
Thanks for listening. Be sure to like and subscribe. If you want more content, go to landline.media to get updated news, information, and archived editions of our show. Once again, that's landline.media.
Control your toll costs and eliminate tolling headaches with Prepass Tolls. Prepass Tolls means toll volume discounts. Just one invoice for all tolls and fewer violations. Call 877-878-5970 or go to prepass.com.
I'm a dad,
a son,
a husband,
wife,
I'm a writer,
photographer.
I farm.
I'm a veteran.
I love old cars, fishing,
my kids,
chrome,
and I am
a professional truck driver.
And together we are OOIDA.
OOIDA was founded by truckers to stand up and speak on behalf of truckers. We've done that by combining the individual voices of our members into a single, powerful voice. Protecting your interests, defending your rights.
Join us!
Make your voice heard. Join OOIDA, the Owner-Operator Independent Drivers Association. Call 1-800-444-5791 or visit OOIDA.com.